Game developers commonly need to add labels, buttons, and other user interface elements to their games. These UI elements are useful in providing the player with information and a means to interact. Let's start by creating a splash page. I currently am looking at scene 01 of my game. From the Scenes folder, let's create a new scene and call it Splash. Double-click the scene to open it. Double-click on the main camera to focus on it. In this scene, we are going to use the main camera instead of the camera that comes with the FPS controller. However, we don't want to see the 3D world. Right-click in the hierarchy and look at UI to see a list of UI elements provided with Unity. Select Text to add a text element to your scene. Notice that the text component was added along with a canvas and an event system. Each UI element should be a child of a canvas, so it is nice that Unity did this for us. The event system may be useful when we are ready to add functionality to the UI elements. Select the text game object in the hierarchy to see its properties in the inspector. Note the game object is named text. There is a component of that object named text, and there is a property of that component named text. Change the text property to the name you want for your game. I'll call mine Jake's Game. Let's also change the name of the game object to title text. If you run the game now, you see the text appear generally in the center of the view. Going back to the scene view and focusing on the canvas, you can see that the text is in the center of the canvas. However, if you click on the main camera, you can see that neither the text nor the canvas is in the view of the camera. So why can we see the canvas and the text when we run the game? The key is in understanding that a canvas is not treated like other game objects in your game. Instead of being part of the world, the canvas behaves as an overlay of your camera. I like to think of it as being stuck to the lens of the camera, or as a pair of glasses placed over the camera. No matter where you look, the canvas is always in your view. So it really doesn't matter where you place the canvas, or even what size you make it. If you want any 3D objects showing on the splash screen, you would place them in front of the camera as usual. The elements on the canvas will appear in front of all other game objects. For this example though, I do not want to see anything beyond the canvas. With the canvas selected, there does not appear to be any property to set an opaque color to the canvas. Let's right-click on the canvas in the hierarchy, go to UI, and add a panel. You see the panel fills the canvas and does have a partially transparent color. When you run the game, you can tell you are looking through that canvas. Looking at the properties of the panel, we see a color being applied in the image component. Clicking on this opens up a color window. When I change this to black, I see the panel immediately change. It is still partially transparent though. You can see the RGBA values at the bottom. That is the amount of red, green, and blue that make up the selected color. The A represents the alpha, or the amount of transparency. If we slide this over to 255, the panel becomes completely opaque. In the editor, you can still see through the panel, but when you run the game, it is solid black. What happened to the title text? It's still there, we just cannot see it because the black text is on a black background. Let's go back and look at the title text properties and change the color of the text to white. Running it again, we still don't see the text. This is because the panel is covering it up. We can simply move the title text to be a child of the panel. When you run the game now, the text is showing. Let's change the size of that text. With the title text selected, let's set the font size to 80. Notice it disappeared. As Ford Prefect would say, don't panic. The text is not showing because it does not fit in the Rect Transform component. Simply change the size of this component by dragging the width and height properties until they reach a value that reveals the text. I'm also going to select the center option for the alignment property and drag the title text game object up towards the top of the panel. Next, let's add a button to allow the player to start the game. In the hierarchy, right-click on the panel and select UI Button. With the button selected, you can see that you could change the style of the button, including adding an image for the target graphic. However, there does not appear to be a place to update the text of the button. To do this, you'll need to go back to the hierarchy and expand the button object. Select the text element of the button, and you can then change the text of that button to Start. If we run the game, we have a Start button now. Unfortunately, pressing the button, we see it currently has no functionality. Going back to the button object and scrolling down in the inspector window, you see there is an on-click script which would allow you to add functionality. While I welcome you to explore this, I prefer a different method for adding click functionality to my UI elements. I'm going to add a new script and name it Start Button Behavior. I see the script now in the Assets folder, and I'll move it into the Scripts folder. To be consistent, let's also rename the button to Start Button. Let's open the script up now. We are not going to need the update method, and let's also delete the comment of the start method. In the start method, add the line getComponent of type button, that's a method, so use the parentheses, .onClick, .addListener, and that is also a method. In those parentheses, we'll type in taskOnClick and a semicolon at the end. So basically, we are adding an event listener to make sure that we are listening for when that button is clicked on. And when it is clicked, we are going to run a method called taskOnClick. So we need to create that method. For now, let's just add a debug.log to print out button pressed every time the button is clicked. Back in Unity, let's open the console window where our message will be output. We see some errors. The first says the type or namespace name button could not be found. It goes on to ask if we are missing some using directives. Let's first try adding in the Unity Engine.UI using directive. Save and go back to Unity. After a moment, the error disappears. Wonderful. When we run the game and press the Start button, our message appears in the console. Let's change the name of the method to represent what it will actually do. I'll name it LoadScene. I'll replace the debug statement with the same line of code we used before to load Scene 1. Remember, to use the Scene Manager object, we must use the Scene Management class. When we run the game again and press the Start button, the player is transported into Scene 1.